Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast. Today we are wrapping up a week of talking about assessments, and we're going to be throwing some stones at the fitness industry today. We are talking about why most assessments are a complete waste of time. Your beat tests, your max heart rates, your sit and reach test, all of it, throw it out the window.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just trying to catch a few of the stones that were thrown just now. Welcome to the show. If it's your first rodeo, my name is Yanni Baumeister. Across the table from me is my brother Rad Baumeister. To my left, if you're watching the live stream, is our resident physiotherapist, Phil White, founder of ADPT Physiotherapy.
Now, one of the
founders, yeah, that's right. And of course, behind the mixer is the sexiest man on the planet, Richard Lellies. We are Unity Gym in the Unified Movement System, where we turn driven people into athletes. Now, today we're going to be lifting the curtain and telling you exactly how we do it. Are you excited? Smash the like button if you are. Before we go any further, I want to ask the question of the day. I want to get a discussion in the comments here, whether you're on YouTube or on the live stream in the UMS Movement Mastermind group. Have you ever done a good physical assessment, process, method, whatever it was, with a trainer or a coach? Let us know what it was and the type of data you got from it. And how is everyone this morning?
Good. Quick plug for what the show yesterday, because we were just talking about how I'm only one of the two physios here now. Really stoked to have had Nilesh on the show yesterday, and we basically did like a how to not see us guide. So if you missed yesterday's show, make sure you do go back and have a listen or a watch, because there's some good stuff in there. So I'm feeling good about it.
I heard it was a great show. I wasn't here. I wasn't allowed on the show yesterday. They just couldn't have too many smart people in the room at once. No, I was away.
Are you feeling better today?
I am feeling a bit better today. We're getting there. We're getting there. I'm in my meeting attire. For those of you who are listening on the podcast and would love to see what my meeting attire looks like, you need to jump over to the UMS Movement Mastermind group on Facebook, join the group, agree to abide by the code of conduct, and then you can see all will be revealed. You can see Phil's incredibly laid-back, surfy appeal, energy, vibe, and Rad's shut up and do some bloody burpees. We do want to send some love to the group. If you are on the group, let us know who you are. If you're watching the live stream, let us know who you are. Answer the question of the day, or just tell us where you're tuning in from. I want to hear Richie's voice once. Oh, you just flashed.
That's rad.
Flashed a buff-looking Rad on the screen.
I was really hoping you guys didn't see that.
I hit the wrong button. Damn it!
That was like that moment in Fight Club where he cuts in the little bit of porn of the kids' movie, just a flick of and all the kids.
Rad, without your computer open, you missed a shirtless top pic of you just popping up on the screen.
Well,
it's a Friday. There's a lot of Friday energy in here today, Tribe. There's Friday.
We can't get enough shirtless pictures of me.
We got that Friday energy going on. For everyone who doesn't believe that Richie's alive, how are you, Richie?
I'm good, everybody.
Yeah, he's feeling good?
Yes,
good stuff. Okay, we can move on. We got that down. Send some love to everyone listening on the podcast. Send some love to everyone watching on YouTube. Smash the like button. I'm going to do it right now. If you guys want to hear why we don't like the industry standard of assessment. Now, let's just start by talking about what you get taught when you're a personal trainer. So you go to see an average personal trainer, and most of the time, we were taught, I can only speak from experience here and what I've seen. I worked as a PT in a big chain gym for just over 10 years. You're taught to take basic measurements, heart rate, blood pressure. You want to make sure that the individual that you're about to start training doesn't keel over and die from a stroke or a heart attack. Both kind of important, you could say, kind of. And then you say sometimes they do a waist measurement or throw you on a set of scales. I hear some good trainers now are doing what we do and encourage people to go get a DEXA scan, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, to get some sort of more accurate measurements of body mass, muscle mass, bone mineral density, things like that. But generally, there's not a lot of physical assessment that takes place beyond that. You might get some trainers who do like a sit and reach. I've seen some trainers do a max lift on the bench press, squat, and deadlift, which I think is just downright dangerous, straight up. And then if you want to go beyond that, you've got to really invest some time. You've got to invest some time and you've got to invest some money, which is what we did, and we went and learned from a bunch of people. Now, I even went over and did the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association's level 1 and 2 courses, which were great, but more appealed to trainers or coaches who wanted to get into training athletes, professional athletes, and then they teach you how to assess people and set benchmarks based on their specific sport. Not very useful or applicable in the general populations scenario in gyms. And so it sort of leaves you with this gaping hole with most personal trainers where they don't really know how to properly assess. And that's one end of the spectrum. And they're doing just the bare minimum. And what that results in is really mediocre programs being designed. They're designed based on people's goals and how that trainer personally trains themselves. You know, you see everyone, I saw this time and time again, if you've got a personal trainer who loves bodybuilding, everyone becomes a bodybuilder, all of their clients, even the women, you know, that just wanted to lose some weight. And then you got the flip side, you got trainers who are right into their endurance sports, and everyone becomes an endurance athlete, you know, and that works well for people who want to lose weight, but not so well for people who want to gain some muscle, you know. And so you got this big hole in the middle, which is this lack of education. And then you got the other end of the spectrum, and this is what we find really interesting, which was me. I went out and spent the first 6 years of my life as a personal trainer investing every spare cent, every bit of disposable income. I literally moved back in home, lived with my dad, so I didn't have to pay as much rent. And I just kept reinvesting into my knowledge and learnt a lot. And one of the things I learned, I went down the rabbit hole of Paul Chek, who was great at the time and very popular. And, you know, I ended up building out this assessment process where I was assessing people for like 6 days. Like they needed 6-hour sessions to get through my assessment handbook. And then I'd compile this wicked report that took me about, a couple of hours to write per client, that gave them all this data, you know, and it was then like the worst case of analysis by paralysis you've ever seen. You know, you were like, okay, what the hell do I do? Paralysis by analysis, whatever it was.
Either way.
You know, what do you do with all this data? And that becomes a real stifling place. You know, so you're these two ends of the spectrum: trainers who don't really know how to assess, and haven't invested the time in learning, and then you've got the other end of the spectrum where they're over assessing and they're really let's talk a little bit about why.
Rad, were you much of an assessor back in the day when you started personal training?
No, not at all. Yanni and I both weren't. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the first time I really got the rude awakening of how little I knew as a personal trainer, and it was when a guy named Donal Carr, who was one of the big Paul Chek dudes in Australia, and he did a workshop that was going around to the different fitness firsts, and it was coming to mine, and it was called "If You're Not Assessing, You're Guessing," and it just was the biggest, wake up call for me. It shined such a light on that I was just guessing. There was nothing that was structured about the way that I was putting, there was the basic way of pairing exercises, but there was no assessing or anything. And then I went to the army after, I think it was 2 or 3 years of being a personal trainer. And when I came back and I started working with Yanni, because Yanni had been a personal trainer the whole time, and that's when he did all these courses that he spoke about. And he gave me this fucking booklet, man, of this is what you've got to do with someone. And I remember just looking at it going, fuck me. And anyway, I went and did some of the courses. I did the Bataji Fitness Institute level 1, 2, and 3. And level 1 was all about structural balance assessment and then creating a structural balance program, which is basically what our foundations program is. And level 2 was all about strength assessments and doing, it's basically the assessment process that we use now. And creating programs based around that. And then level 3 was much more about, fat loss and higher level stuff, metabolic assessments and things like that. But yeah, so I came back and we did all those assessments with people. So I was there. But we by that time, Yanni had, it was funny, we had this booklet of assessments, and I said to him, how the hell do you get this done in a session when somebody's paying you for a session? And he said, just focus on this stuff. And so what I was doing was there was this booklet, and only about 20% of it was ever getting done, and we were doing very little with what was getting done anyway, which is the point of this show. It was this whole lot of assessments, and we ended up we were just writing the same programs for people, because I'd go to Yanni and say, okay, these are the results of the assessments, what should we do with it? And he'd help me go through it and understand it and figure it out. And then it was like, just give him this program. We'll give him this, this and this, because it's going to deal with X, Y and Z. And we ended up, after a year of Yanni and I doing that together, Yanni was, for the first time, was writing programs with me. So he was writing double the programs that he'd normally write.
Well, not just that, we had another 3 trainers working for us.
And we just kept writing the same people. We just kept writing the same programs, because the basic things for everybody were there. They had unilateral imbalances. Most people needed a little bit more pulling. They needed to work on, trying to open up their shoulders and
Well, I want to jump in there and say that it was a period of about 5 years where we had 5 trainers running people through these physical assessments, and that we did length tension assessments, we did unilateral, we did symmetry tests, we did strength tests. Length tension, for everyone there, is really a nice fancy term for flexibility and mobility testing. And that was a really great, we collected a lot of data points, 5 years with 5 trainers assessing this, and we actually used this as a system to attract new clients. So I would teach the trainers how to do these assessments, and they would walk out on the floor and offer people to take them through these assessments. And by this time we'd narrowed it down to a pre-exercise questionnaire for previous injury and illness history for themselves and their family, so we could collect that data. And that was really a means to say, okay, you are a risk factor, we want you to go and see a doctor, or go out and get some blood tests done so we can look deeper into what's going on, just to potentially remove any roadblocks that could get in the way of them losing weight, mostly related to weight loss. Then we would take them through the basic symmetry tests and length tension tests, and we called them confirmation tests. And then we'd take them through some strength tests, and it was a basic series of strength tests, and then later on we'd do a more advanced, when they were ready for it, series of strength tests. But the whole thing would be done in a couple of sessions by now, You'd send them the pre-ex questionnaire at the start, you get that done, and then you'd take 1 or 2 sessions to get the rest of it done. And it was really quite streamlined. But what happened over that 5-year period was we collected a lot of data points. Very, very useful information that I was analysing, and I became the program designer. So I was in an office basically just looking at the data that was getting brought to me by 5 trainers who were training quite a variety of people, from general populations to people who had a little bit of experience in the gym, and not too many professional athletes. It was mostly general pop. And I was just getting the same thing over and over and over again. This is ridiculous, And so what we started to see was correlations between people who spend a lot of time sitting in a chair all day. That we were catering to mostly office workers. Mm-hmm. The only time it ever was different is if we got a builder or a labourer who came through and did the assessment, and then they'd have slightly different attributes and nuances and things like that, And I just ended up creating a blanket structural balance program that we used, and every once in a while I'd make a couple of tiny little changes, but it got to a point where it was just like, this is what people needed, and it worked so well. And we built a reputation in that gym. Like, people would come with an ailment or an issue or an injury, and we would do all the tests, and we'd go, okay, do the structural balance program, and they go,
we'd do all the tests, and then we'd fix it with the same program that we did for the last 10 people.
Yeah, and my trainers are like, yeah, but that's no different to the program so-and-so's doing. And I'm like, yeah, trust me, just do it. And they do it, and they'd be just shocked. They'd go, why did that work? And you're like, because most people just need a little bit more strength in the shoulders, a little bit more stability in the shoulders, a little bit more core strength, basic stuff. We used to put a lot of emphasis on bulletproofing the forearms and gripping muscles through that period. And what this is called is it's a general preparations program. It's a program preparing you for training.
Before we go into that, let's let Phil jump in here, Phil, because I want to, if we backtrack a little bit. So we talk about these trainers who were going through this massive assessment process. What is the issue with that? What is our issue? I mean, you're the one that you framed this really, really well when we spoke about this recently. It was within the last couple of weeks or this year, where you were talking about basically the way that you get such good results with clients, with your physio clients, is
you're about to give away the key point here.
Am I?
Yes,
Okay,
but
right.
what I want to highlight
I
is
just wanted Phil to have an opportunity.
No,
No,
he's
I'm-
going to explain this. I'm going to let him explain this, but don't start with the punchline.
That's how you do the best jokes.
What we noticed was that we were because these were new people who were really untrained as far as weightlifting goes and strength training, and we were getting the same data from every single one of them, which begged the question: was it even useful or valuable giving them these assessments? And I didn't see it. I didn't see it until I spent some time with Phil, and he sort of, he lifted the veil of what's it called when something's bleedingly obvious, and I was like, geez, that makes so much sense. We shouldn't have even been. There was no need to even assess these people because they all have common issues. They need to, and why don't you share what that is? What are the common issues, and what's the problem with assessing new people when they first start training?
Yeah, I guess like the thing is with assessments is that it kind of, to get accurate data, you need to have like a fairly consistent result each time you do the assessment. So if someone is, say, doing like a balancing lunge walk and they've sort of never done it before, and then you get them to do it a couple of times, then if this is sort of like a new movement for them, then they're going to be all over the place, and it takes a bit of like skill acquisition and correct technique to get reproducible sort of data. So if you're getting if you're kind of taking like 3 measurements on a new movement and then making assumptions from there, then it's just kind of noise. Like you're just taking sort of data points that don't necessarily reflect how strong or how good at balance or how flexible someone is. And so, yeah, that when you have someone completely new, you can basically just end up giving them a program that's just not actually as relevant to where they are at the time. So.
Yeah. And so we've since, and this was a big deal for me because I built my entire career off assessing people, basically holding up the mirror, showing them how messed up their body was, and then they would just sign on the dotted line and go, train me, fix me, I've got so many problems. And this plays into the narrative that we're going to talk about in depth next week, which is creating an injury identity, creating an imbalance identity, we're going to call it today, which everyone has. Everyone has. This is the thing, and this is the beauty of the assessment protocol and doing it. Everyone has structural imbalances, and you're never going to be perfect. The idea behind assessing, and this is where we've taken our protocol, is that it's just pointing you in the right direction continually. You're not going off out into the reeds, creating worse dysfunction in your body. You're continually working to level up your best self. You're striving for your best version of yourself, but that doesn't mean that you're striving for perfection. I mean, no one's ever going to be perfect. And when to sum it up, and I'll let Phil talk a little bit more in a sec. What assessing someone who's very new does is it provides far too much data when really all they need is to learn the basis of like proper movement first. And then when you assess them, when you run through the assessment later on down the track, you get a much more clear picture of what their body really needs. Everyone comes with the same thing, and this is what you just tipped on there. Most people who haven't balanced on one leg are going to struggle balancing on one leg. Most people who haven't learnt to retract or control their scapula are going to have problems contracting and controlling their scapula. Most people who have never done really good heavy barbell back squats are going to suck at an overhead squat with a dowel rod in their arms. It's just bleedingly obvious. And so when you put people through those assessments, it's a nice way to build a business because people will realize how much they suck. But it's not really that useful. Is it the best way to get a result with someone? We found that it wasn't, And so what we do now, based on 17 years of experience and constantly iterating and working with great people like Phil and Nilesh here, bouncing ideas and concepts off each other, is that we no longer put people through any form of physical assessment when they first start. We do a pre-X questionnaire to make sure that they're not going to keel over and die, or to screen any injuries that they might be working through so that we can adapt what they do to that. But then from there, we focus on drilling down technique. And this really comes about from watching the boys practice with their clinic and how they work with patients, and they get incredible results. Why don't you explain why that is?
Technique is really important, and that's to really sum it up. Like, if there's just, some people sort of think that, like, like if you're doing a squat is a squat is a squat, but like there are so many different variables to how you do different movements, and if you have good techniques and you're basically putting in like stopgap measures, like backup measures. So if if you're focusing on 9 different things during deadlift to get the technique right, if you mess one of them up, not a big deal. But if you mess all of them up, that's where it starts to get problematic. So if you have like no idea what you're doing and you're just trying to get to a really high number without sort of having those measures in place, and you're gonna.
Yeah, I think that a really big problem is that people focus on the intensity variable far too soon when they should be focusing on technique at the grassroots.
Technique variable,
so the intensity variable, if you don't know what that means, is intensity refers to how heavy or how hard. So if you're lifting with a barbell and you're doing a squat, you increase intensity by adding weight to it. And if you're doing calisthenics or even weightlifting movements, you can increase the intensity by going to a more complex movement, a more challenging movement. And people do that way, way, way too soon. When the big win comes at the start from really, really honing the technique on whatever it is that you need to work on, which is the basic stuff. And then when the technique's good, you increase the intensity, get strong at that movement, and then you change up to a more challenging movement.
Go on.
And that's why we do what we do now. We get people to work on the technique in the basic movements, in the things that are going to give you a big win, whilst we're focusing on structural balance from, within a joint, agonist and antagonist, or opposing muscle groups, opposing movements, also from left to right, also from flexibility to strength. So by doing all of that, which is what a well-written program will do on its own, like if you're doing a well-written program just by doing the workouts, you're taking care of those 3 things. But you're doing it in an environment where you're told that it's the technique that matters here, not the amount of weight that you lift. And that's why we have a foundations phase to our online programming and to our people at the gym, where it's all about that.
Yeah, I had a meeting with Sebastian Orob yesterday, Australian strength coach, and we were talking about exactly this, where he's basically saying, like, and this is very much in a elite powerlifting sort of context, so a bit different here, but I think the principle really applies, is that you can have a great program, and if you have terrible technique, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you have like great technique and a kind of shitty program, like you'll still get
you'll
progression.
Still make gains. Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really important at this stage is to discuss the concept of micro load and why micro load is blown out when you've got really poor technique, because I think that's where the cookie, where the what do you call it, dropped for me. The
penny?
The penny dropped. No,
yeah, that's right.
I'm unwell at the moment, and my brain is. I have chronic brain fog, so you have to bear with me. Yeah, that's when the penny dropped for me. Is understanding, that we have to manage load, and we talked about intensity just before, which is a part of managing load. But one of the worst things you can do to mismanage load is have really bad form and technique. That really increases the micro loading variable on your body. So why don't you just explain that quickly?
Yeah, well, another plug for yesterday's episode with Phil and Nilesh. We covered this in a little bit of detail, and next week we'll be jumping into a whole lot more detail on the macro and micro loading episode, so stay tuned. But the basics is that, depending on how you, biomechanics and leverage really comes into play, and depending on how you position your body while you're doing certain movements, you'll vastly change how you're loading structures. So I guess the kind of classic one is with a squat, and the difference between anyone who's done a front squat and someone who's done a low bar back squat, there is a massive difference in how much you're putting pressure through or putting load through the knees versus how much you're putting through the hips. So it can be, in the same program, you could have a squat and you could vastly change how you're loading through the body. And if you have, maybe you're doing something like a whole lot of trail running and you're doing lots and lots of downhill running, and your knees are really getting loaded in that kind of context. If you come in the gym and then you, with a squat, you just think like, oh, I have to do a conventional high bar ass to grass or a front squat, and you just keep on loading up your knees that way, then suddenly that technique is just like really compound effects and all that. So those are perfectly fine, safe movements if loaded like in the right context. that could be really problematic for someone. So whereas like a hip dominant low bar squat would be really appropriate. So you can just see how so micro loading within a technique just plays such a huge role in your overall sort of progression.
So, let's finish on for the last couple of minutes explaining when assessments become really, really useful and why it is that we sort of try to discourage people. And for anyone listening to the podcast and watching the stream, something really useful that you can take away from this is that, we all want to know where our biggest levels of growth are going to come from, and most of us are in a rush to do everything. Like there's no really way of avoiding it, whether it's accumulating wealth or in finance or physique. We're all rushing. We're all trying to get to the end goal as quickly as possible. We want the results yesterday, and we're upset because we haven't started a year ago, and so, or we've had some time off for whatever reason, and we're trying to make that time lost back as quickly as possible. And so we all want to see where the biggest bang for our buck investment in our time is going to come from, and that's where we sort of can easily go down the rabbit hole of, I need to go to an expert and get fully assessed, and then he's going to give me the perfect prescription based on that, But often what we end up doing is getting really, really overwhelmed by the data that we get, especially if we've had time away from exercise or we've never trained under those in that environment before, like strength training or whatever else. And that's where I would argue that you probably going to get a much better result by working with someone like Phil or someone like us who is just going to, we have a prescription of 15 foundation movements that we use in our program, and each of those movements have regressions and progressions, but we have a blueprint that we want to get everyone proficient in, and those movements are movements like the barbell bench press or standing overhead military press or barbell deadlift, conventional deadlift, front squat, barbell back squat, single leg step up, all these things, external rotation movements for the shoulder rotator cuff, trap 3 raises for the shoulder scapular control, all of these movements that have stood the test of time and are considered sort of benchmark movements. And so with a system like that, we can create a protocol where the number one goal initially is to master technique in those movements. And we have our Technique Optimizer program launching this year, which is designed exactly to do that, And then we can take a step back from there and say, okay, so what do we need to make sure people are achieving before they hit that Technique Optimizer? And that's where our Foundations program comes in, which is going to work to make sure that each side of the body is fairly close in symmetry. We're not overly strong in the right arm and really weak in the left arm, and we're not the same in the legs. Things like that are very common and problematic for a lot of people that we found from all of that data we collected, which is, the body's ability to externally rotate the shoulder as opposed to internally rotate the shoulder, and the body's ability to retract and depress the scapula so as to set a really good base for a heavy bench press or a heavy press or a heavy chin up. Those things need to be achieved before we start lifting really heavy. And so we're able to do that, and we generally put people through those two programs before we ever put them through our assessment protocol, because until they become proficient in all of those movements and all of those adaptations, the data that you get from assessment is insane. Like and it's like if that's your thing, if that's your vibe, if that's what makes you happy, collecting 10 pages of data about why you suck, then by all means go and dive into a really extensive assessment on day one. But what we found is it's really not very beneficial. Where you get the biggest bang for your buck, which is going to play into that thirst for quick results, is to just dial the technique and the foundation movements that you're going to be practicing later on. The big movements, the big bang for your buck movements, chin-ups, deadlifts, squats, learning to use dumbbells properly to stabilize the shoulders in your pressing and pulling movements, all that sort of stuff. And then take yourself through a really good physical assessment protocol, because the data you get at that point is going to be true data. It's not going to be generalized data that everyone gets, and we've done this, trust me. We assessed literally thousands of people, and the assessments came back the same, like so similar, it wasn't even funny. And we've collected the data. We've gone down that rabbit hole for you. You don't need to do it yourself. And it makes a huge difference. And then at that point, when we start to collect data, and we do it every 6 weeks as a back off or deload period of our programming, our whole tribe together comes in and does the testing week, where we do length tension, we do strength testing, we do symmetry testing. And then that data becomes really useful, because then you get a true picture of what your body actually needs, and you can construct programs going forward. So every new program becomes an iteration of the previous program to keep pushing you in the right direction of creating your best balanced body. And that is what you need for optimal athletic performance. That's what you need to break through plateaus. That's what you need to avoid injury. That's what you need to optimize performance, and that's how we do it at Unity Gym. It works exceptionally well. And we've created, from that point on, the only thing you need to think about is efficiency. How do you fit it all in to a week or a program that's not going to take ridiculous amounts of time and get in the way of you actually making progress,
Yeah, you don't have to come in for 6 hours of assessments. That's
well, we do it over 5 days now, and it's
part of training.
That's the point. It's part of training. It gives you a workout,
and it's deload week,
and it's deload week anyway. So it works into that whole program methodology that we follow. So it works really, really well. 100%. We've got a comment here from Sasha Elsnick. Hello from Germany. Hello back to Germany. First time live, wanted to do FMS, which is the functional movement screening, due to awareness of some disbalances or imbalances, which physios didn't really point out, but couldn't find SB doing FMS close by in Germany. SB
is.
I'm not sure what SB is. Can you give us, Sasha, give us some insight into what SB stands for? And look, I did the functional movement screening assessment course. It was a 2-day workshop where you could become certified to teach it. And I don't know how they facilitate that now. That was many years ago when it was first sort of coming out and becoming popular. And I learnt a fair bit from it, but I found exactly this, that, they do a lot of these drills where you're sort of stepping over a dowel rod. Do they still do that?
Years ago.
They look at your hips and whether you can keep your hips level and balance and all this sort of stuff. And they did a whole bunch of sort of these crawling drills where they're getting you to extend and move your limbs whilst you're balancing on one side to see whether you lean or all this sort of stuff. And I just found it was a perfect example of what we're talking about here. It just gave analysis, paralysis by analysis, and I just didn't find the data that I collected very useful. Like at that point, I was quite a high performer, and it made me look like I should have gone back and relearned to crawl. Like there was so much wrong, and I was like, so what? Like, where do I go from
That's the
here?
big thing with assessments. Like, if assessments are useful if they change your management or they change your programming, and that's what I really found. The FMS was like, it's kind of like, okay, great, you've made like these challenging exercises that are a bit sort of funky, but like, it didn't really direct into a like coherent sort of program, and and I think it basically points out like, hey, great, okay, do a structurally balanced program, and like that's where it really changes management. And that's what I just say to you, Sasha, like, it's one of the things about like people worrying about imbalances is it's sort of sometimes not overly like a useful path to go down. Like if you follow a balanced program and you follow the right sort of like programming within that, like it will sort itself out, and don't let some idea of like a imbalance just stop you from doing things you like.
Yeah, the takeaway that I would leave everyone with is that you definitely, training is training, competition is competition. Training should be training you in a manner that either A, is suitable for the sport that you are playing and specific to that, or B, is training you in a really balanced way so that you are building a foundation that you can sort of deploy into any sport that you choose to do, which is kind of what we like to do. We don't do really specific training for athletes. We have a lot of athletes who are in the gym, who come through the gym, and they do our program because they find that's what they need. They want to become more well-balanced and well-rounded, But the problem with the functional movement screening system, which I found, this is me personally, and I remember I did it a long time ago. I'm talking it must have been almost 10 years ago now or more. It it just tells everyone the same thing. You need more. You've got like really bad stability in your hips, really bad stability in your shoulders, and you need to deal with that. And that's exactly what I used to find when I used to do my assessments. Everyone got the same sort of result, and that was like, okay, so now you need to go and do a program that is better at balancing your body. You know, probably more unilateral movements, probably more focus on providing better stability in the hips, better stability in the shoulders, things like that.
And I do think with a few of the FMS movements as well, like the way you get better at them is practicing those
movements.
Specific,
exactly,
stepping over down rod.
Yeah.
It usually just sort of takes you by surprise, and you're a bit like, oh,
yeah.
And
That's
if you just
exactly
did it
right.
a few more times, you get better at that test. But practicing those movements and getting better at that test wouldn't make you a better all-round performer. And what would do that is doing a really balanced, good program.
Yeah.
I do want to just clarify with assessments. So we're talking about a sort of personal trainer context here, and that a few people might be kind of listening and seeing like, oh, physio saying that assessments are sort of useless, or not always a good use of time. But I just want to kind of point out that like injury assessments are quite a different thing here compared to the sort of like training guidance assessments. And so with physio assessments, that's generally like, you know, you get a lot of information from a subjective history, and then you do some movement testing, and you know that does give you good information about injury, but we're just talking about quite different styles of assessment here. So just to clear that up.
Good clarification.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, look, that's pretty much all we got time for today.
Well over more than we've got time for.
Yeah, we gotta jump into our online coaching group in just a sec. And so, if everyone who's listening who is part of the UMS online coaching group, jump over there. We'll be up and running in a few minutes for your weekly group coaching call. For everyone else on the UMS Movement Mastermind, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Sasha. And Sasha, I would challenge you to get it next time we do a free trial of the UMS online coaching. Jump in and check that out, brother, because I think you're going to find that that's what you're looking for. Or sister, yeah. I think that is. I have to look at the photo to see. I think it's a guy. Yeah, it's a guy. I was right. Thanks for making me look like an idiot. Yeah, dude, I would jump in and check it out because I think our assessment protocol is superior to FMS. Just saying it. You heard it here.
Got him.
Everyone, have a great weekend. It's Friday here in Sydney, Australia, so we'll be back on Monday. We got a wicked series coming at you next week. It's all about injuries, rehabilitation, and load management. It's going to be a fantastic deep dive, so
My
don't miss
closing
that
thoughts are that not only is our assessment process superior to the FMS, our name is superior. The UMS is superior.
For those of you who don't know, we used to be called Foundation Movement System, FMS, and we changed it because
It's superior.
it was we
superior
couldn't use the
name.
acronym. All right, guys, have a fantastic weekend. Thank you very much for joining us. Smash that like button if you like today's discussion, and we will see you next week. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's the
far.
consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.